Deep in the woods of Alabama, hidden by decades of overgrowth and silence, sits an old wooden cabin once owned by country music legend Hank Williams. For years, it was locked, forgotten by time, and untouched by human hands. Locals whispered that it was cursed, that inside were the ghosts of Hank's past, the memories that haunted him until his final days. But recently, a small team of historians and family representatives gained access to the property for the first time in over half a century. What they discovered inside left everyone speechless. The air was thick with dust and heartbreak, as if the room itself had been frozen in the exact moment Hank walked out for the last time. This is the story of what they found: letters, recordings, and one final message that could change everything we thought we knew about the troubled king of country music. When the door creaked open for the first time in decades, the air that escaped felt heavy, like the sigh of a man who had carried too many secrets for too long. The wooden boards groaned beneath every cautious step, and a thin shaft of sunlight pierced through the cracks in the roof, illuminating dust that danced like ghosts. The crew moved slowly, aware that they weren't just entering a house. They were stepping into the final refuge of a broken soul. Hank Williams's abandoned cabin wasn't just a building, it was a tomb of memories. Near the stone fireplace, they found an old rocking chair still swaying slightly, as if someone had just left moments ago. On a small table beside it sat a half-empty bottle of whiskey. Its label faded but still readable: Old Number 7. Next to it was a Bible, open to Psalms 102. "Hear my prayer, O Lord, and let my cry come unto thee." The pages were stained with what looked like tears. In the corner, a dusty guitar leaned against the wall. When one of the men gently strummed a single string, it released a lonely, trembling note that filled the cabin with eerie emotion. It was said that this was the guitar Hank had used during his final writing sessions, songs that were never recorded, lyrics that lived and died in that lonely cabin. On the writing desk was a stack of yellowed paper, each sheet covered in Hank's unmistakable handwriting. Some were lyrics, others were unfinished letters. One addressed to his son, Hank Williams Jr., dated just weeks before Hank's death in 1953. The words were trembling, uncertain, yet heartbreakingly sincere. He wrote about the pain of fame, the betrayal of friends, and the burden of being the hillbilly Shakespeare. He confessed to feeling empty, saying that no stage, no song, and no applause could fill the hole inside him. "I built my life on music," one line read, "but somewhere along the way, I lost myself in it." Behind the desk, a faded photograph was pinned to the wall, a picture of Audrey Williams, his first wife. Her face was half torn, as if ripped in anger, yet taped back together with care. The contradiction mirrored Hank's own tortured love life, forever torn between affection and resentment. Deeper inside, a trap door led to a crawl space where more artifacts were found. An old suitcase filled with notebooks, a pocket watch stopped at 5:30, and a reel-to-reel tape labeled simply December Sessions. None of the experts had ever seen or heard of it before. The tape was sent for restoration, and what it revealed would shake the entire country music world. But before we get to that, what they discovered behind a false wall in the cabin would expose the most personal side of Hank Williams ever known. Behind the cabin's main room, the restoration crew noticed something odd: a section of the wall that sounded hollow when tapped. They carefully removed the wooden planks, revealing a hidden compartment sealed with old nails and time-worn boards. Inside was a small wooden chest, untouched for more than 70 years. When they pried it open, the smell of aged paper and tobacco filled the air. Inside were Hank's personal journals, a handful of black and white photographs, and a letter marked, "Do not open until I'm gone." The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably his. One of the journals dated back to late 1952, just weeks before his death, and it revealed a man who had already accepted his fate. In the pages, Hank wrote about the darkness that follows him everywhere, the sleepless nights, and the feeling that God had turned his back. "I see my name in lights," he wrote, "but when the lights go out, I'm just a lonely boy from Montgomery trying to find his way home." The journal also detailed his failing health, his back pain, his reliance on painkillers, and the heartaches that drove him deeper into the bottle. But what struck readers most were his words about redemption. "If the Lord lets me sing one more good song," he wrote, "I'll make it one that saves me." The letters inside the chest were more personal than anyone could have imagined. One was addressed to his mother, Lily, thanking her for loving a sinner who never could stay right. Another was to an unnamed woman, possibly a secret lover, where Hank poured out his guilt for the way he treated her, writing, "You saw the man, not the myth. That's what scared me the most." There were also several photographs, Hank sitting by a lake, holding his guitar, and another of him smiling with a young boy many believed to be his son. But there was one photo that puzzled everyone, Hank standing beside a man who bore a striking resemblance to him, but older, with the caption, "Me and My Shadow, 1948. Historians began speculating, was this symbolic, or was there something more to it? Some claimed Hank believed he was being followed by an omen, that the shadow man haunted him through his life. What made this discovery heartbreaking was how clear it became that Hank was living in torment. The fame that made him a legend was also what destroyed him. Every song he wrote, "I'm so lonesome I could cry," "Your cheatin' heart," "Cold, cold heart," sounded less like hits now, and more like cries for help from a man drowning in loneliness. As they finished cataloging the items, one of the team members discovered a key hidden in the bottom of the chest. It was small and brass, with HWS engraved on it. They had no idea what it opened, until one of them noticed a locked trunk under the bed, covered in cobwebs. What they found inside that trunk would reveal the final, most painful truth about Hank Williams's last days. The trunk beneath Hank Williams's bed was unlike anything else in the cabin. Its metal corners were rusted, the leather cracked, and on the lid, faintly scratched with a penknife, were the words, "Sing me home." When they unlocked it with the small brass key, the lid creaked open to reveal layers of carefully folded possessions, each one telling a piece of Hank's story that no biography had ever captured. The top layer held a neatly folded stage outfit, a white nudie-style suit with embroidered notes on the cuffs and faint stains near the collar. It was the same suit he wore during his final live performance in Austin. Underneath was a bundle of handwritten sheet music tied with twine. The songs had titles no one recognized. "The Night Heaven Closed Its Door," "Ain't No Road Back to Me," and "Jesus. Please don't forget the drunk." The lyrics were raw, stripped of performance, full of confession. One page, dated December 30th, 1952, just 2 days before he died, was written in shaky pen strokes that faded halfway through a line. "If I don't make it to New Year's, tell them I sang my prayers instead." Beneath the songs was a small tin box filled with items that broke the hearts of everyone present. A lock of blonde hair tied with a ribbon, believed to belong to his son, Hank Jr., a child's drawing of a guitar, and a note written in a child's hand that said, "Sing for me, Daddy." The paper was stained and folded, as if Hank had kept it with him wherever he went. There was also a small pocket Bible with a pressed flower between the pages and a photograph of Hank smiling faintly with a group of soldiers. None of these things had ever been seen by historians or family, but the most mysterious item was a small reel of magnetic tape labeled Cabin Recordings, Private. The discovery sent chills through the team. They carefully packed the tape for restoration and later played it using vintage equipment. What came through the speakers stunned everyone. It wasn't just Hank singing, it was Hank talking. Between verses, he spoke softly, as if to someone sitting in the room. "I ain't sure who'll hear this," he said in a trembling voice, "but I'm tired. I don't hate the world. I just can't carry it no more." Then he sang a short, haunting melody no one had ever heard before. His voice cracked as he whispered, "This is the song I couldn't finish." The tape ended abruptly, leaving everyone in silence. Some members of the restoration crew reportedly broke down crying. It was as if Hank had recorded his own farewell. Experts later confirmed the authenticity of the voice. It was indeed Hank Williams. That tape became the centerpiece of a new investigation into his final days, revealing not only how he died, but what he truly wanted the world to remember him by. The Cabin Recordings tape changed everything historians thought they knew about Hank Williams. It wasn't just another forgotten session. It was a man's final attempt to make peace with his life, his fame, and his faith. The recording began with static. Then Hank's voice came through faint but clear. "It's cold tonight," he said softly, followed by the sound of him striking a match. "Ain't no crowd, no lights. Just me and the Lord trying to sort things out." What followed was a stripped-down version of "I Saw the Light," sung so slowly it sounded like a prayer instead of a performance. Between verses, Hank's voice cracked as he said, "People cheer when I sing this song, but they don't know I'm still looking for that light." Experts described it as the most vulnerable moment ever captured from a country legend. Then came a melody no one recognized, a song later titled The Lost Psalm. The lyrics, scribbled in one of his journals, spoke of forgiveness, regret, and the longing for rest. "If I don't wake in the morning, don't you cry for me. I've been walking with the shadows. Now I'm finally free." Toward the end of the recording, Hank's tone shifted. He started speaking directly into the microphone, his voice trembling but deliberate. "They think they know Hank Williams," he murmured. "They don't know the man that cries himself to sleep after the stage lights go out. They don't know the hurt that fame can bring. You can't love the crowd and the Lord at the same time. It'll tear you in half." He paused for several seconds, and then whispered something that sent chills down the spines of everyone who heard it. "I ain't afraid to die. I'm afraid to be forgotten." Those words became the emotional centerpiece of the documentary being made about the cabin. They revealed a man who, beneath all the success and swagger, just wanted peace. Investigators soon discovered something even more astonishing. The handwriting on the tape's label matched that of Fred Rose, Hank's longtime producer and friend. That meant someone else had known about the recordings. Rose, who passed away in 1954, had never spoken publicly about them. Could he have hidden the tapes in the cabin to protect Hank's reputation? Or was he fulfilling Hank's dying wish to keep them secret until the world was ready? The more they uncovered, the more tragic the picture became. The cabin wasn't just a hideaway, it was Hank's sanctuary, his confessional, and possibly the place he spent his final peaceful days before that fateful drive to Canton, Ohio. But before the investigation could close, one final discovery would change the story yet again. Beneath the cabin floorboards, workers found something even older than the trunk. A sealed envelope, scorched at the edges, with 3 haunting words written across it: "For my final ride." The envelope marked "For my final ride" was brittle with age, its edges darkened as if it had been too close to fire. Inside were 2 folded pages and a faded bus ticket dated December 31st, 1952, the very night Hank Williams began his final journey. That small piece of paper, creased and smudged with fingerprints, felt like a time capsule from the moment his story ended. The letter inside was handwritten in Hank's familiar scrawl, but this one was different. It wasn't addressed to anyone in particular. It read more like a confession to the world. "If you're reading this," it began, "then I reckon I didn't make it. I ain't scared of dying, but I hate leaving things undone." He went on to describe how he had planned one last comeback tour to prove to everyone that he could still sing, even though his body was giving out. He wrote about his pain, the constant ache in his spine, the sleepless nights, and how the pills no longer worked. But then, the tone shifted to something softer. "I got peace here in this cabin," he wrote. "No applause, no bright lights, just me, the wind, and the Lord. I reckon this is the only place I ever felt like myself." The second page was shorter, but even more devastating. It contained what seemed to be the lyrics to a final song, one that had never been recorded or even mentioned in his notes. The title, written in trembling letters, read, "The Road to Heaven's Gate." The lyrics painted a vivid picture of a lonely journey through a dark night, with a refrain that echoed like a prayer. "If I fall asleep while driving, let the angels take the wheel. I've been lost so long, Lord. Show me something real." Those words hit harder, knowing that just a few days later, Hank would indeed fall asleep in the back seat of a blue Cadillac and never wake up again. When experts analyzed the handwriting, they confirmed it was written within days of his death. The bus ticket attached was never used. It was for a route to Shreveport, where he had planned to surprise an old friend with new music. But instead, he accepted a private gig that took him on the fateful drive toward Ohio. It was as if Hank himself had sensed the end coming and left behind this letter as both a farewell and a confession. The team sealed the letter in archival glass for preservation, but the emotional impact lingered. One historian, wiping away tears, said, "He didn't just write a goodbye to life. He wrote a goodbye to pain." The discovery made the mystery of Hank's final hours even more poignant. Why did he choose to leave the cabin that night? Did someone convince him to go against his instincts? A new theory began forming, that Hank's death wasn't just tragic, but perhaps the result of one last desperate attempt to escape his demons. And inside the cabin's fireplace, where ashes from an old fire remained, investigators found a small metal box that would finally shed light on his final night alive. When they pried open the small metal box buried in the ashes of the cabin's fireplace, it was clear Hank Williams had intended for no one to ever find it. The latch was melted shut, and the box was warped from heat. Inside, preserved by luck and time, were fragments of burned paper, a charred photograph, and a small silver cross on a chain. As the investigators carefully separated the contents, one document, though singed, was still legible enough to read. It was a note written in Hank's own hand, its tone darker than anything found before. "I tried to burn my pain," it began, "but fire can't take away what's inside a man's heart." It went on to describe a night of deep despair, one in which Hank claimed he'd spoken with the devil himself. Whether he meant it literally or metaphorically remains unknown, but the language was haunting. "He offered me rest," Hank wrote, "but the price was my soul. I told him I'd rather keep singing in the dark." Scholars later theorized that the passage wasn't a confession of evil, but a symbolic reflection of his inner battle between fame and faith, the very struggle that defined his short life. The charred photograph was equally heartbreaking. It showed Hank sitting on the cabin's porch steps, with his guitar resting across his knees, staring into the woods. On the back were 3 words written in faded ink: "Don't come lookin'." Many believe it was taken in the final weeks of his life, a moment of resignation and solitude. Beneath the photo was the silver cross. Experts discovered it had once belonged to his mother, Lily. Hank had worn it during his earliest tours before fame took over, but it disappeared after 1949. Finding it here, scorched and tarnished, suggested that before his death, he'd tried to return to his roots, to his faith, to something pure that fame had stripped from him. The fire in the hearth seemed to be an attempt to destroy his demons before leaving the cabin, his final act of cleansing before the drive that took his life. One of the restoration team members later described the moment of discovery as like standing in the middle of a man's soul after he'd left his body behind. The revelation sparked a renewed wave of interest in Hank's story, not just as a legend, but as a human being who carried the weight of his own creation. Reporters swarmed the site, fans gathered outside the property's gate, and the Williams family requested privacy while the artifacts were examined. But one final mystery lingered, a faint set of initials carved into the stone above the fireplace: HW and AW. The AW could only refer to Audrey Williams, his first wife. Did she once share this secret retreat with him? And if so, had she known about the things he hid there? Days later, a relative of Audrey's stepped forward with a story she had kept silent for 70 years, a story that would finally explain the hidden initials and why Hank never wanted anyone to find that cabin again. The relative who came forward was Audrey Williams's niece, now in her late 80s. She spoke quietly, her voice trembling as she recounted what her aunt had told her decades earlier, a secret she had promised to keep until the day the cabin was found. According to her, Audrey and Hank had shared that hidden cabin during the brief periods of peace between their fiery arguments. It was, she said, the only place they ever really loved each other without the world watching. The initials HW and AW carved into the fireplace had been done one summer evening in 1946, long before fame, before the drinking, before the heartbreak that tore them apart. The niece described how Audrey used to say that Hank was a man haunted by angels and devils both, and that the cabin was his church, a sanctuary he built for the moments when he couldn't face the crowd or himself. She also revealed something that had never been documented. After their separation, Audrey returned to that cabin once, alone, just weeks after Hank's death. She had the key, and according to her niece, she went there to burn the letters Hank had written her but never sent. That could explain the scorched remains found in the fireplace and why the cross and photograph survived partially burned. "She told me she tried to burn his memory," the niece whispered, "but the fire went out before she could finish." She took it as a sign that he wasn't ready to be forgotten. This revelation reframed everything. The metal box wasn't Hank's doing. It was Audrey's. The note that read, "I tried to burn my pain," may have been Hank's. But Audrey was the one who set it alight, perhaps in guilt or grief. Her niece remembered one thing vividly. Before Audrey left the cabin for the last time, she reportedly said aloud, "Goodbye, Hank. You'll find your peace when they find this place." For decades, no one knew what she meant, until now. As word spread of the discovery, the cabin became a pilgrimage site for country music fans. Some came to pay respects, others came to touch the wood where the legend's pain still lingered. But for historians, there was still one unanswered question. The December sessions reel found earlier contained gaps, sections of blank tape that suggested something had been recorded and then erased. Audio experts using spectral recovery later uncovered faint traces beneath the silence. A second voice. A woman's. The voice said only one sentence, almost like an echo through time. "Don't go, Hank." It was unmistakably Audrey's. The realization sent chills across the team. How had her voice ended up on that recording? Had she been there when he made it? Had the two reconciled in secret just before his death? Some speculated that Hank had invited her to the cabin for one last goodbye, recording their final conversation together before leaving for the trip that would end his life. Others believed it was symbolic, a recording layered with memories, a man haunted by the voice of the woman he couldn't let go. Whatever the truth, that discovery changed how the world saw Hank Williams. He wasn't just the lonesome cowboy or the tragic outlaw of country music. He was a man trying to make peace, with love, with loss, and with God. The cabin stood as a monument to both him and Audrey, a love story buried in ashes, resurrected by accident. As experts prepared to seal the cabin for preservation, one final find, hidden under a loose floorboard near the bed, brought the entire story full circle. A handwritten message in fading pencil that simply read, "When I sing again, I'll be home." That final message, "When I sing again, I'll be home," became the line that defined Hank Williams's entire legacy. It was written on the underside of an old pine floorboard, barely visible until the sunlight hit it just right. The handwriting matched the notes and letters found throughout the cabin, confirming beyond doubt that it was Hank's. No one knows exactly when he wrote it, but experts believe it was among his last reflections before he left that cabin for good. The phrase felt like a prophecy, an understanding that death was not an end for him, but a return to peace, to music, to the place where he could finally rest. As word of the cabin's discoveries spread, fans and historians gathered from across the country. The media dubbed it Hank's Last Sanctuary. Crews documented every corner, every artifact, every line of ink, as if piecing together the puzzle of a man who had been both a genius and a ghost. But amid the excitement, those closest to Hank felt something deeper, a quiet heartbreak that the world was finally seeing the man behind the myth. His granddaughter, Holly Williams, visited the site privately. Witnesses said she sat on the porch steps for nearly an hour, holding her guitar, looking out at the same trees her grandfather once stared into. Later, she told reporters, "You can still feel him here. You can feel his sorrow, but you can also feel his peace." Inside, the objects told a silent story. The Bible on the table remained open to the same verse, Psalms 102, its pages untouched since the day it was found. The burned photograph of Hank and his guitar was framed and placed on the mantel directly beneath the carved initials HW and AW. The restored reel from the cabin recordings played softly in the background as visitors entered. A voice that trembled, confessed, and prayed all in one breath. "I ain't afraid to die," Hank's voice whispered. "I'm afraid to be forgotten." Yet standing in that cabin, surrounded by the echoes of his past, it was clear he would never be forgotten. Over time, the cabin became more than just a historical site. It became a place of healing. Fans left letters, guitars, and flowers at the doorstep. Some prayed, others wept. The Williams family decided to preserve the cabin exactly as it was found, untouched, unpolished, authentic. They believed that Hank's spirit belonged to that space, that every creak of wood and flicker of light carried a fragment of his soul. When restoration teams finished their work, they held a private memorial service at sunset. Musicians gathered with acoustic guitars and sang the songs Hank had left behind. The ones from the trunk, the unfinished hymns, the ones too personal for radio. As the last note of "I Saw the Light" faded into the twilight, the wind rustled through the pine trees, echoing faintly through the valley like a whisper from another world. Some swore they heard a single voice hum along, soft, distant, but unmistakably his. In that moment, it was as if Hank had come home. The truth of the cabin's contents, his pain, his love, his redemption, painted a portrait more human than any legend could ever capture. He wasn't just the heartbroken troubadour or the tortured icon. He was a man who yearned for forgiveness, who sang his prayers when he couldn't find words, and who left behind the kind of silence that speaks louder than applause. And now, decades later, as the sun sets behind those Alabama woods, that silence remains, a reminder that Hank Williams never truly left. He just went home the only way he knew how, through song.